Welcome, I'm Joel Grimes. I'm going to show you how I did a dual focusing technique using a view camera back in the 90s into the early 2000s. Before digital came along, I shot this 4x5 camera all over the world for ad agencies, clients, some of the top clients in the world. It was a period in my I guess you say my photography career that I call the kind of the golden age of what I was doing at the time. Large format portraits. I did a video that just released not too long ago that talks a lot about that time period, showing a bunch of pictures. I'll show you a few pictures here that I've done with this camera during that time period. In that video, I mentioned that I used this dual focusing technique, and people keep asking, what was that dual focusing technique? Because they want to know. Now, I developed this technique sort of out of, I guess you would say, this problem-solving sort of scenario. And I did a book on the Navajo people up in the Four Corners, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, and Colorado area. Spent 2 years photographing those people. And I had a 4x5 at that time. It was a little Wista. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do some 4x5 stuff. And I had done quite a bit of 4x5 stuff for landscapes, architecture at the time. Not much people stuff. And I did a couple sessions, and I got the film back, and they were out of focus. One was a shot of this incredible, amazing, beautiful medicine man in his 90s, and the shot was ruined because it was out of focus. So I got kind of pissed. I said, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. And I shot most of my portraits with a medium format, the Mamiya RB. I eventually got an RZ later in life. And so, because I couldn't take the risk. So then fast forward a few years, I had a studio in Denver. I was shooting ad stuff. And I had this request to photograph. It was an ad agency that called me up, said, we want you to photograph this big game hunter from, I guess he was a famous Jed Cooney, I think it was his name. And we have, Nikon has these scopes. And we want you to do a portrait, a delicate black and white portrait of this guy. But you have to use a large format Nikkor lens. I thought, all right, well, okay, you know. And then I got to thinking, oh no, that's gonna be, you know, I don't wanna risk this out of focus kind of thing. And so I was tossing and turning in bed, and you know, they do in the old days, they put the, you know, the prod thing behind the neck so you wouldn't be able to move. And I thought about that, and I'm like, that's not very efficient. And then you have the string, where you take a string and you know, let's say you measure it off, and then if the subject gets ready, you take a picture, you bring the string out, and you bring it to the nose, and you tell the person to come forward, and you fire your 4x5 off. That's still not very good. I tried that a few times, not very efficient. Laying in bed, thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Here's an idea. Now, one of the things I laugh about is that I was barely a C student, and on occasion, over a lifetime of 45 years of problem solving, you're bound to come up with something that's kind of brilliant. And when I say brilliant, when you see this, you're going to probably say, why has no one ever done that before? I wrote an article on this technique back in, I think, 1992 or somewhere around there, maybe 95. And so at that time, I had never heard anyone that had ever mentioned this technique. And when I shared it with a number of photographers, they all, like, their jaw hit the floor. And there was one guy in particular who was a large format guy, taught at the Santa Fe workshops and all this stuff. And I told that to him, and he literally fell down on the floor and went, why has no one ever come up with this idea before? And so I felt pretty proud of this little discovery. But what it changed my life is that once I discovered this, did that ad campaign for Nikon, this stuff came out incredible. I then got I guess you'd say, the self-confidence to go and start shooting a large format camera, doing portraits, and doing a series. And I used a Type 55 Polaroid. And I started doing those portraits, grabbing anyone I could, testing. Then I ended up I had a photographer come in who was a big name photographer at the time, and he walked in my studio, and he's like, I had these portraits all on the walls of this large format Type 55, and he's like, oh my gosh, how are you doing this? And I explained to him, he's like, you need to go and put this stuff in the workbook, which is a national book that went out to ad agencies on a national, international level. And it was very expensive. And I thought, I don't know. I went home and I went to my wife. I said, this guy really encouraged me to do this. And my wife, we had a couple kids at home. Ended up, we had 4 kids total, but at that time, I think maybe we had all 4. It was like, all right, let's invest. So I invested it. It takes a year before it comes out. That series of images launched me on a national level. I was working in Denver at the time. Well, launched me on a national level, if not international level. And over the next 7 years, I shot probably at least 7,000 plus sheets, maybe even more, of Type 55, processed them all myself, shot ad campaigns all over the world. This camera took me to probably 30 countries. And it was kind of a heyday of my career in terms of just, I was living in heaven. I couldn't have been more excited. Going to Kazakhstan, Brazil, Hungary. I went to a lot of South American countries with this camera. So let me explain to you how this works. Now, I'm gonna just jump in here for a second. I have not been doing very many YouTube videos. Most of my, as you follow me, I do a lot of online training, but I'm going to try to do more YouTube videos for you guys. So if you could hit that subscribe button, and that way I'm getting close to 100,000 subscribers. It'd be great to hit that mark, and then I can just sort of keep on putting out as many YouTube videos as possible. There's my pitch, and when people do that, I like to help out, and I usually hit subscribe. So now that's been said, let me explain to you this technique. All right, so if you don't know the 4x5 or a view camera, number one, it's an upside down image. It's kind of, first it's like, wow. But there's a benefit in the long run because your brain eventually flips it correct. And it doesn't look upside down when you're looking through the viewfinder. No, that sounds kind of weird, but anyone that's done large format will tell you that. It takes a couple months of really using a 4x5 before it sort of happens. And then you get very comfortable. And then it really helps to your composition and stuff, because your brain is having to work this weird kind of, I don't know, like overtime. And you are very, to me, my portraits have always been very delicate, and the approach that I have with a large format, something happens, I just love the outcome. So you open up the lens, let's see it here, I got this lens open, and then the light comes in, you have the widest aperture setting, and then you have a ground glass, okay? So you take your focusing aid, and you focus on the subject, okay? So if it's a 210 lens like this, which is normal to a little bit telephoto, it's a little bit wider. So if I shot wide open and did a portrait with this, my depth of field is about that much. So it's pretty shallow. If I move in closer and get in here, that depth of field might be a 1/4 of an inch. So very challenging to use a view camera with that shallow depth of field. So the subject goes back, out of focus. And even if you're doing like a waist up, I mean, if they do this, you could lose that focus, okay? So then you ruin your shot, and the shot's worth nothing. So let me explain how this works, and it's really simple, but yet kind of, I shot out of those 7,000 images, not one was out of focus. So that's a pretty good track record. So let me explain. So I'm gonna use 2 cards here as sort of my way to explain this. So this is a focus plane. So let's say, I'm not gonna have a real shoot here, but let's say I go out and I focus, and as I move in and out, this focus plane moves as I'm focusing, right? So at some point, I let go, it is established as a focus plane. So let's say that focus plane is right here. Maybe I do it sideways. It's better for you. There's the focus plane. So how do I go and shut down the camera? So I have to shut down the camera. I have to go get my film holder. I have to open up the back, put the film holder in, get all in position, and then I cock the shutter, and I go there's my picture. Now in that time, sometimes it's 5 seconds, or sometimes longer because I'm fiddling a little bit. Maybe if I'm shooting multiple sheets, that person might do this, relax, and you don't know it. You bend down to pick your film holder, you don't see them move, and all of a sudden you're out of focus. So once I establish my film plane, I started out with a second camera, put it on a tripod. Now, I don't do that now, but I'm going to show you this is the best way to explain it. Doesn't matter what camera it is. At the time, I can't remember what I had. Doesn't matter what lens it is. All you're doing is creating a plane of focus with this camera. So I establish my plane of focus here, and then I focus with this camera until I match that plane of focus. So what I do that is I go here, look, focus, say don't move, go over here, focus, okay, don't move, double check, good. Now I've got both of these focused on the eyeball, let's just say. And so I shut this down. I can't see here if I'm doing that right. Yeah, so that's open. I shut it down. I go over here and grab my film holder, put it in here. And in some cases, you could have your subject just actually get up and walk away and say, okay, come back down, sit down. And you say you're dead centered and you're framed up. And you say, okay, hold on a second. You come over this lens and you say, move forward, move right there. And then I fire it off. This is how we do it. So what I do is I have it all set up here and I say, okay, look in the lens here. And I come over here and I'm like, okay, focus, I mean, come, move forward. I don't touch the focus here. I'm saying move forward or backwards until, where's my other card? I think I threw it across the room. Here it is. Until both those planes are in focus, I'm now looking only at this focus plane. This one's already established. This one's here and established. And then once I go, that eyeball is in focus on this one, I know it's going to be focused on that one. So I'm like looking through here and I'm like, okay, come forward right there. There's my shot. Now, we don't always have to carry a dual set of tripods. And I took this camera around the world. I did not take, well, actually, I think I always had a 35 millimeters doing annual reports and stuff. But what I did is I have a buddy, Carrick James, who was a Pentax guy. And he said, hey, Joel, why don't you use this little Pentax? It's a single lens reflex. And right now the mount is in a case in my garage, but I mounted it up here. I can also, I think I had a clamp, a super clamp mounted here, whatever. And so what I did was I would use this, which also has a split little center, so I can really nail right on the eyeball. And then I use this as my second aid to my camera. And it gives me a 100% confidence that when I fire this thing off, it's going to be in focus. And I did some really close-up portraits, just faces, and it worked perfectly. So there was one other aid, and I cannot find it. I've dug through all my drawers. It's out in another case. I've got years and years of collecting stuff. And it was a little Graflex rangefinder. It wasn't as good as this. But in some cases, I think I mounted it up here, and I could just use the little rangefinder. It has a split, a mirror split focus, and I could use that, and it would be pretty good, but not as good as this little thing. I don't know if these even exist, but you can also just use your digital camera. Now, I'm hoping to go out and create some portraits, my cowboy series or whatever, with this camera. I'm kind of bringing it out. That's why I'm kind of talking about this. And probably what I'll do is I will have to proof, because I'm going to be strobing. And with a strobe, I need some kind of proofing system with my lighting. If I was just doing natural light, I probably wouldn't need to proof it. When I was doing, back in the day, film, I'd always shoot a type 100 Polaroid, peel it, proof it, move my light, adjust my light, whatever, shoot another Polaroid, okay. Then I would go to my type 55 film, positive film, negative film. And so that was a way of proofing. Now what I can do is I could use my digital camera to test my lighting and use it as a focus aid. So I think that I probably will end up going back to a maybe 2 tripod system. Not perfect. If you're, in a hurry, you'd never do this system anyway. So having 2 little tripods is not gonna, or 1 big one and 1 little one, is not gonna kill me. So there's my dual focus technique, and I hope that explained that well enough to you. But you remember, there's if I take my camera and tilt it like this, my focus plane actually goes and bends or comes forward like that, right? So that plane is always going to, I can move it around with a 4x5. With digital camera, it's always flat, unless you have a tilt shift lens and you do a tilt on it. But basically what you're doing is you're creating a plane of focus with 2 cameras, and then you match them up, and then you look through here and fire it. So there's my little focusing technique. Well, I want to send you a ebook called The Photographer's Guide to Lighting. It's something I put together. One of my favorite ebooks I've done. All sorts of techniques on how I approach my portraits, from the classic cross light to simulating sunlight. I have all sorts of tips in here. I want to give this to you for free. Now, don't be alarmed. I'm not going to send you a bunch of promotional emails unless you opt in to do that and get on my list. I just want to give this to you for free to help you as you go through your journey on sort of living your dream as a photographer.